Thank you everybody for joining our latest Wellington community event. Grab your popcorn or your coffee, whatever you need, and let's talk about the trends for 2025 that we expect to see in the world of PMO, and hopefully give you some hints and some tips and some insights that you can take forward into the new year. And we are going to do a quick round of what's going on with the world of PMO for 2025. So we're going to explore how 2024 was for the PMO. So we're going to look at some of the research that has happened and some of the things that have happened in the world of PMO, and maybe we'll get some of your experiences as we go at the end. We're going to also identify what can we learn from that. Are there any lessons that we can actually learn from 2024 that we can take into 25, and then uncover what's coming next year? What are the trends that we are expecting to grow and command more interest and more of the conversation? And then hopefully we'll give you the recipe how to get future PMO ready as we move forward. So let's explore how 2024 was for the PMO. So there's been lots of research done this year actually on the world of PMO, which has been really quite positive. So there's a number of things that we can see here. So the PMI did a couple of research papers, one their typical pulse of the profession, and then one with PwC, which is kind of really looking more about transformation and project management. So let's have a look at a couple of these quotes, which kind of tell us a lot about what's happening in terms of the perceptions of PMOs. So first of all, the PMI talk about the fact that their research is indicating that PMOs have the capability to provide project professionals and teams with all the enablers so that they can be better equipped to deliver better results. So we're starting to really see the value and the perception of PMO in terms of enabling our teams to deliver effective, sustainable and on-time projects is actually growing. So really looking at how can we dive deeper into PMOs being able to amplify those key enablers. And this is one of the reports that we will be sending you a link to at the end of the webinar, so that you can have a proper read of it. But we can see that people are now starting to rely on PMOs to support professionals in not just delivering, but adapting their ways of working. As our world is more complex and more ambiguous, it's really important that our project practices move and work and adapt to that. And PMOs are starting to really be seen as the enabler for that, which is amazing. Over on the right hand side, we can see the individual competence baseline for PMOs, which was released earlier this year, so in late January, early February, from the International Project Management Association. So for those of you who are aligned with the IPMA competence baseline and qualifications, this is a really interesting time for you, because we now have a competence baseline specifically for PMOs from the IPMA. So really looking at how PMOs can help to drive organizations' project management practice forward. So really positive step now that we can see and we know that the APM has invested lots in PMO, the IPMA is now investing a lot in PMO, and the PMI has also invested in the world of PMO. So it's a great time to be in PMO, basically. The other piece of research that we can see underneath is a combination of PMI and PwC, and they did a global survey on transformation, and they also talked about PMO maturity. So really kind of looking at PMO supporting the ways of working, so improving knowledge management, which is a key principle for us in the world of PMO, is supporting that learning organization. So what we do with that knowledge, that sharing and transfer of lessons, continuously adapting our processes, as we've just talked about, but also they also noted that organizations with PMOs that deliver value were twice as likely to report better revenue growth than the previous year, and 3 times more likely to report better customer satisfaction. So we are really seeing the value and the perception of PMO growing. So some of you might have seen some of LinkedIn posts and articles that are kind of talking a little bit negatively about PMO at the moment, but if you actually dive into those, you'll see that there's a very different message, because overall, if we look at the official word, if we call it that, we can see that PMOs are adding value. They're perceived to be a real enabler to deliver successful projects and also support our people and ultimately our strategic goals. So overall, our view at Wellington is that it's been a pretty great year for the PMO. So what can we learn from that and some of the experiences that we've had throughout 2024? So we are very good at knowledge management, because we are PMO, it is one of our core principles. So let's see if we can identify the lessons, and then let's see if we learn from them and we can do something in 2025 about all of these. So first of all, sponsors need support too. So I talked about this at our Future PMO conference around the importance of understanding education needs, but not just focused on the delivery teams. And in fact, our sponsors are the gap for many organizations at the moment. We kind of make an assumption that sponsors, as soon as they get put into a senior role, they just magically know how to sponsor projects. And it's very unusual for them to be taken out and to be taught, to be educated on, this is your actual role. This is more interesting if we look at the National Audit Office research that talks about sponsors being the biggest predictor of project success or failure. So the quality and the availability of our sponsors actually have much more influence on whether we're going to succeed or fail with our project. So we need to think about, when we are looking at changing our processes, being more pragmatic, taking on new technology, is not just how do we train the project managers and the people contributing to projects, but also looking at our sponsors, because they need support too. And if you felt like my sponsor's not really been visible or they've not really been present, then maybe it's because no one's ever told them what their role is supposed to be. And if we've never told them, we've never educated them, we can't magically expect them to just know. We can also see in our own research and conversations at Wellington with clients that prioritization from a portfolio perspective is becoming a priority. We can see that this is becoming more and more urgent for people as they start to really focus in on developing their project management practice. So we talk a lot about prioritization, making sure that we're categorizing projects in the right way so that we have a balanced portfolio that's aligned to our strategic objectives. So one of the key lessons for me is, let's start focusing on how we incept our projects. How do we choose them? How do we prioritize? How we decide what we're doing first, second, and third? Because it is becoming more and more part of the conversation. The other thing that we've seen, particularly since the COVID pandemic, is the value of knowledge management. So really managing the knowledge that we get from our projects. Now, this we might know as lessons learned, and I can feel most of you rolling your eyes as soon as I say those two words. But what we need to do as PMOs is think about elevating the concept of lessons learned and talking about knowledge management and taking the knowledge we get from those projects and doing something with it. And we see that this has jumped up the rankings massively in terms of our own research, where knowledge management used to be quite low down in terms of the priorities, whereas nowadays we find that it's always in the top 3 or 4, the value of knowledge management and how the PMO can support that. The other thing that we've learned this year is that networks matter. So whether you have internal or external networks, making sure that we're engaging with them, that we are present in them, and that we get out as much as we put in. So if we do engage with networks like the Wellington community, where there are free events like this every single month, we don't charge for it. You have access to a clinic. We don't charge for that either. But using your networks to help you to develop your own capability and move yourself forward in terms of your particular project management journey. At Wellington, we're very passionate about that. We're very focused on having somebody that you can just pick up the phone to, literally, if need be, and say, I've tried something and it doesn't work, or I'm not sure where to go next. So pull on your networks. Do not be afraid to kind of ask for help. The other thing we've talked about, or we started talking about a lot more, is benefits realization. Now, we know that this is a big, heady topic, but actually what we found this year is the rise of OKRs, so objectives and key results. This is something that allows us to take benefits realization, which is big and scary and long term, and we're not quite sure if we're ever going to be able to embed it. And it puts it into digestible chunks using the concept of sprints, which we're all probably familiar with. So OKRs, objectives and key results, is an easier route to deliver benefits over time. And it is definitely something that we want to learn more about in the future. The next one, the next big lesson is that accidental project managers are increasing in number. So we talk about accidental project managers as the SMEs in your business who get asked to do a piece of work and find themselves accidentally running projects. And again, like the sponsors, maybe we've never given them the right education. So making sure that we are providing them with an insight into what is project management, what are the things you're going to have to do. How can the PMO support you in that journey? But also, really importantly, how do you fit it into your day job? If you're an SME and you're not 100% of your time a project manager, how do you self-manage to make that enough of a priority without kind of destroying the core of what you're doing? So accidental project managers are increasing in number. We are seeing this as a trend. So make sure that you're looking after those people. PMO metrics. We know we've been talking about PMO metrics for a really long time, but we are seeing that the PMOs that are implementing metrics, a balanced scorecard is our preferred approach, into their organizations, that reports on not just project delivery and the portfolio, but also on how the PMO is performing as a service provider. They're getting much more traction in their organizations in terms of engagement and being that kind of pull-push situation rather than just as pushing stuff out. So take the time to define some metrics. And Agile application is reducing. Now, we're not talking about Agile is dead, although I'm sure that will be the next headline, but organizations are applying Agile and Waterfall and other frameworks in a much smarter way. So we're seeing the rise of, if we call it the hybrid approach to project management as a movement. We are seeing that organizations have kind of settled the Agile argument in many cases to go, oh, actually, sometimes it's useful and sometimes it isn't. So let's do something that's a bit hybrid. So not that Agile is going away, but that we need to understand how do we use Agile in conjunction to everything else that we've got going on. So organizations are getting a little bit smarter and not getting hung up on the Agile or Waterfall or something else. So some really important lessons this year for the PMO. And now we need to know, how do we move these into 2025? So we have 2 slides with 8 specific trends, if we call them that, and I'm going to break these down a little bit into kind of why is this trendy, why do we feel like this is important at the moment, and just to give you a little bit more context. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will also, as usual, have a companion article for you with a bit more information. So let's have a look. The first one, Agile and PMO agility. So the evolving role of PMOs in Agile organizations. It's trendy because as we increasingly adopt those Agile practices, maybe in a smarter way than we would do a couple of years ago, PMOs are often tasked with ensuring alignment whilst also embracing agility. So that difference between Agile with a big A and agility with a small a is actually really important. And this is what organizations are starting to be able to define. As more organizations seek to lever the strengths of both Agile and traditional approaches, understanding how to manage a hybrid environment is becoming increasingly important for PMOs. So what does that look like? That looks like being cognizant of all of these different types of frameworks. Do we have to be experts? No, we hate that term at Wellington. We don't use the term expert because it kind of implies I've asked the expert, which nowadays is Google or ChatGPT, and there isn't another answer. We know that our world, our industry, is a bit more volatile and ambiguous than that. So, you know, it's not about becoming the know-all of everything, but being able to support our internal PMO customers in that way of working. The next one is the big one, AI and automation in PMO, really helping to transform project management. This is revolutionizing many industries, and project management is no exception. So what we're doing here is looking at the impact of artificial intelligence on day-to-day work, for example, on our delivery processes, and having strategies. A couple of weeks ago, we did a webinar with a PMO who has, or a networking event, I should say, with a PMO who has tried this in real life. They've taken full on AI and they've tried it in their PMO. So if you have a moment, go back and watch that webinar, look at that article, because it's really interesting to see actually it isn't for everything, right? It's like all of the new things that come along, and they actually were able to create that case for change that said, we want to use it for this, this, and this, but not for this stuff over here. So get to grips with what's going to work in your organization and create a strategy for AI. This is where we're going to fall short, is if our organizations don't have a strategy for how we're going to deal with the growing need for AI. Data and decisions. So data-driven decision making in PMOs, the emphasis on this is growing across all business areas, including project management. So lever the data analytics that we have, having the right data to improve outcomes so we can really enhance performance and accountability, which both need to be better than where they are today. So having the right KPIs, dashboards, real-time reporting, enable yourself with technology. There is stuff out there that you might not know about that you already have access to for free. I did a webinar with one of my colleagues, Baz, the other day, and he talked about you might already have some of this available to you. So speak to your IT departments to understand what is there. And the fourth one is about driving business value. So the PMO being seen as a strategic partner. Now, we've seen from the research that we are starting to be seen as much more enablers, much more of that strategic partner, which we're trying to get to. So that strategic value of PMOs is a hot topic as companies increasingly demand that their PMOs contribute directly to achieving business objectives. So aligning ourselves to strategy, driving that culture of change, and creating and sharing and publicizing our path for an evolution. What we don't want is to have a situation where we're kind of great and golden today, and in 6 months it normalizes and we start to lose that perception of value. The way we alleviate that happening, that law of diminishing returns from biting us, is to have a roadmap that demonstrates our path of evolution into the future. The next ones, so change management or facilitation of specialisms. Change and transition management. We now know that, and we are seeing greatly, that most organizations do not have change management teams who have their job supporting project managers in doing that, which means the PMO also needs to be helping to have that conversation and encourage that. So change and transition management, looking at safeguarding our projects in a digital world. So the importance of cybersecurity, especially now that we're moving into that artificial intelligence world, a lot of which sits outside in the wider kind of web. So offering insights into risk management, assurance and security in terms of best practice, we need to be mindful of the threat that we are bringing, and we need to start having that conversation. The other one in this facilitation of specialism is around sustainability. So again, we have a video from this year's conference which talks about sustainability and the PMO. So not necessarily owning all of the sustainability, but making sure that we are incorporating green conversations into our project processes and creating that crucial role to drive the practice as we move forward. I've already talked a little bit about benefits realization. So talking about we need to have a more digestible way to begin and to continue the conversation around benefits management. So a bit like lessons learned, people don't just roll their eyes and say, oh, that's never going to work. So making sure that we're looking into things like OKRs, which are particularly interesting for very long-term benefits and in the public sector, given the impermanence of that particular environment. And the PMO can facilitate that conversation both during and after the projects. The humans, we couldn't go any further without talking about human first, which is one of our key principles at Wellington. So building that culture of collaboration and innovation as we evolve as a PMO, putting a focus on people, culture, leadership is increasingly recognised as a key to success, as we saw from that research. So making sure we have a community of practice, making sure that we're focusing in on knowledge management. And then last is the maturity. So making sure that we're assessing and enhancing our PMO performance as we seek to improve our effectiveness, as we start to be seen as more valuable. Maturity models provide a really structured approach to understanding and enhancing our capability. So making sure that we're thinking about continuous improvement and demonstrating that commitment to the project management practice in our organizations. So 8 trends that we can see coming, or that we at least know we've been dealing with them for a while, but we know they're going to take up a lot more of the conversation as we move into 2025. So what can you do to deal with all of that? So first of all, read up on the topics that we've discussed here through Wellington white papers and other sources such as the IPMA, who now have that competence baseline, the APM and the PMI. Make sure that you connect with your peers and share and experience being part of that community. It's a really valuable thing to have that peer-to-peer connection. That also creates a safe space for you to ask for help, and that's absolutely what the Wellington community is there for. Also, understand the need in your organization. Just because we've said these 8 things doesn't mean you have to go and tomorrow start implementing benefits realization or OKRs. It's not what you think your organization needs, but it's more about what you know your organization needs. So take the time to understand where you are in your current level of maturity and what's going to help you, because everything isn't going to help tomorrow. Review your current ways of working to see if you can be more pragmatic, simplify, add more of the things that we have discussed in an appropriate way, and embrace change and the things that are coming, whether it's AI or whether it's a new specialism that we've talked about. Actually have a play with it. You don't have to go all out like our networking partner who has done that. So we will share that with you so you can actually see what happens when you implement AI into your PMO. And then think again about what's going to work for you. Lastly, plan for the future. Without a roadmap, how will you know that you've achieved anything? We wouldn't allow our projects and programs to start without having a case for change, without understanding what does success look like. With PMO, we need to get better at this. So take the time. Now is a perfect time to say, let's look at what are we going to do next year. Let's not set ourselves up for failure and actually be able to tell people this is our commitment to the project management practice in our organizations. So hopefully that's been interesting. We will take a second just to do some questions, but before you do, if you are doing Secret Santa next week and you have a PMO person, some Secret Santa gifts ideas that you can get them on there. So make sure that you connect with Wellington, keep the conversation going internally and with us. We are there as long as you're part of our community or you've done some work with us or you've attended one of our courses. We're here to help you for the long haul and your whole journey. And if you haven't already, get yourself a Christmas present and join us at the next PMO conference that we're doing, Future PMO, October the 30th, 2025 in London. And this year we're going to the Jurassic World. Thank you for listening. I want to say thank you very much. And if you need anything, we are here to answer your query. Thanks for joining at lunchtime and we'll see you soon. Thank you.